Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Today, my guest joining us from the Paris Peace Forum is the Nobel Peace Prize laureate and campaigner Nadia Murad. Nadia, you were captured alongside many other Yazidi women in Sinjar in northern Iraq by the so-called Islamic State group in 2014, held hostage, enslaved, tortured and raped. Many other people from your community were murdered. But you managed to escape to Mosul and eventually made your way to Germany. And since you've become a leading global advocate for survivors of genocide and sexual violence. Nadia Murad, thank you very much for being with us on France 24. You were co-awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018. Do you feel in the years since that the world has made any progress on dealing with the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war?
Thank you so much for having me. Progress has been made on recognizing survivors' right to reparations, and that what happened in 2014 and that ISIS used sexual violence as a weapon of war. This has, there has been awareness and progress on this to recognize, but I think it's time to put political weight and resources behind these words. We have heard so many, promises, and we have done a lot of advocacy work, survivors from the Yazidi community, but from around the world. For example, and it was written into the UN Security Resolution 2467 that what happened to the Yazidi survivors and what sexual violence was used as a weapon of war against Yazidi women. But not much has been done to prevent what happened to the Yazidi women and girls. As we speak today, and it's been over 8 years now, and we still have 2,800 women and children who are missing in ISIS captivity in Syria, Turkey, some parts of Iraq, and no effort has been done by the international community or our own government or any international organizations to look for the missing Yazidi women and children and bring them back.
So is that your message then to the international community? We see you there at the Paris Peace Forum where lots of people come together to talk, but this is the action you need. Do you need more funding? What tangibly do you need now?
We need so much because so much was taken from survivors. Their dignity was taken from them. They were publicly bought and sold. They are still facing a lot of challenges. Their family, some of them, their entire families were killed, and thousands of them are still displaced. They don't have access to quality healthcare, education, or even a safe shelter. A few weeks ago, I was in Sinjar, Iraq, and I had, I visited people who have, lost family members who are still 8 years later, mothers are still waiting for their loved ones to be exhumed from mass graves. Families are still waiting for their loved ones to be rescued from captivity. We have hundreds of thousands of Yazidis who are still living in unsustainable environment in displacement camps, but we also have people, over 100,000 people who have returned to Sinjar, and they lack of access of basic services. There is no stable security. There are foreign militias in Iraq, in Sinjar, and other places that are fighting over control of our land. So much is needed. Survivors need reparations because sometimes they are isolated from their community. They don't have access to a safe shelter, and it is so important to know about their needs, to listen to them, and every one of us has their own journey to healing and recovering, and it is so important that we know what their needs are. They are the closest one to their problems, and they are also, therefore, the closest one to their solutions.
Do you feel with current world events, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, economic crises in many countries, there is a danger of many conflicts, including what you're describing in Sinjar, being overlooked or forgotten?
To be honest, it is. This is how sometimes we feel as survivors, that we are forgotten already, even though we haven't healed from what, or recovered from what we went through. We haven't recovered from the huge loss that we lost during this genocide. We feel that many times, and that's why we, as survivors, we try every day to be in places like this, on the Paris Peace Forum, or at the UN General Assembly, or in everywhere, to just make sure that they don't forget us, because this is a real issue, and sexual violence does not go away when war is over. That it must be, we must understand that it does not go away that easily when war is over. Ukraine is sadly another example of a failure to follow through on commitments to prevent sexual violence in war. And there were clear signs of the use of there were clear signs of conflict in Ukraine, but what systems did the international community put in place to prevent the use of sexual violence, or to provide support to those who are subjected to sexual violence? Nothing. And now we see, hundreds of stories coming out from Ukraine that have, they've been through what I and my community went through 8 years ago. So sexual violence will continue until the international community becomes proactive, implementing protection systems and to prevent sexual violence, and the culture of impunity for perpetrators. That's the most important and needed thing, that the culture of impunity must not be an option. And survivors want their day in court. As I've talked to many survivors from the Yazidi community, but also from around the world, who have been through, who have experienced sexual violence, and justice is always the first thing they ask, because without justice there is no healing. Without justice there is no moving forward. And justice is the key here to also prevent, what ISIS did, or what military forces are doing. And no matter who is doing violence is violence, and we must hold them accountable for what they are doing, no matter who is persecuting them.
Do you still have faith, though, in the international community? Because we see it is unable to act on so many big issues.
I mean, in the midst of conflict and crisis, sometimes there are times that we lose faith in the international community. I think if I look back, and if you see in places when we were, women's rights were never a priority for the international community to prevent the use of sexual violence, and it is still the same. I think the international community has failed many times to protect the basic of human rights, and women's rights has never been something that they care about it, or it's that's a priority. For example, the coalition against ISIS, when it started a few years ago, rescuing women from captivity, helping them, was not something that in their plan. And but what we know now is that the international community can no longer see sexual violence just as a side effect of the war. Sexual violence is a weapon of war that has been used against communities and women, over and over again. Warfare is warfare today looks completely different from what it was 50 to 100 years ago, but one thing remains the same is the use of sexual violence in conflict.
I have to ask you finally, and rather briefly, if you can, you have become a role model for many people at a very young age, telling your very harrowing personal experiences very publicly to the world over and over again. Where do you find that the drive and the courage to keep on with your campaigning and putting yourself forward in this way?
You know, survivors have, each has their own, as I said before, their own journey to healing, and I think we have to respect each one of them. It is so meaningful for me to be able to support survivors and help them access to healthcare and education and a safe shelter. It is a way for me to, build something good out of a horrific experience. I found courage in every day in just knowing that I didn't give up on my rights. Yes, my rights were violated, our rights were violated, but I was one of the luckiest to survive, and I feel, responsible since I was one of the luckiest, and so many were not able to survive. I feel the responsibility every day to do something, to tell the story of, so many women and girls and my story. And if I can prevent sexual violence from, being used against others by telling my stories, this is the least I can do to help my fellow women from around the world.
Well, we thank you very much indeed for sharing your time with us and sharing your message with us. Thank you very much. Nadia Murad there, Nobel Peace Prize laureate and campaigner against the use of sexual violence in war. That was the France 24 interview. Do stay tuned. Plenty more news coming up soon.